You can be starving for comfort and still feel ashamed the moment you reach for it. Some people don't just hide their needs. They feel guilty for having them at all. They ask for almost nothing. Then they wonder why they feel unseen, exhausted, and strangely resentful. From the outside, they look easygoing. Inside, they are editing every feeling before it leaves their mouth. They say, "I'm fine," before checking if they even are. They apologize for small requests like they're creating a burden. They wait too long to eat, rest, call back, speak up, or ask for help. Not because their needs are small. Because somewhere deep down, needing anything feels dangerous. That feeling usually didn't appear out of nowhere. It was built in ordinary rooms, with ordinary faces, in childhood moments that looked harmless from the outside. Sometimes no one screamed, no one threatened, no one even said your needs don't matter. But the message still landed. It landed in size, distractions, cold timing, tired parents, emotional absence, or the look that made you regret asking. Maybe you learned that your sadness made the room heavier. Maybe your fear was brushed aside, your hunger delayed, your questions treated like bad timing. So you adapted. You became less needing, less expressive, less inconvenient. And that adaptation can look so mature. Quiet child, helpful child, independent child. People praised how little you required. They admired your self-control without noticing it was built on self-erasure. A child cannot separate love from survival. If warmth disappears when they need too much, they don't conclude, "My environment is limited." They conclude, "I should need less." That thought can follow them for decades. This is why guilt around needs is so confusing in adulthood. It doesn't feel like an old belief. It feels like basic decency. You think you're being considerate. You think you're being low maintenance. You think you're just not the kind of person who needs much. But then life presses harder. A relationship gets real. Work becomes overwhelming. Your body gets tired. Grief shows up. And suddenly the old strategy starts costing you, because adults can survive by hiding their needs. They just cannot feel close, whole, or rested that way. You might be the person who says yes while your chest tightens. The person who can sense everyone else's mood, but not your own. The person who notices when everyone needs water, food, reassurance, or a softer tone. But when you need the same care, something inside you goes quiet. That quiet is not peace. It is often old caution. It is the nervous system remembering that expression once came with risk. Maybe not dramatic risk, but enough discomfort that your body decided silence was safer. So now, even in good relationships, your first instinct is restraint. With kind people, you may feel embarrassed by simple human longing. You want support, but you also want to deserve support first. You want comfort, but only after proving you didn't really need it. You may over-explain before making a request. You may rehearse a text 10 times, then delete it. You may say, "It's okay, never mind," while secretly hoping someone will notice you did mind. And when they don't notice, the hurt feels older than the moment. Because it is older than the moment. It touches the place where you learned that being easy was safer than being known. A lot of people with this pattern were not taught how to have needs without shame. They were taught how to read the room before reading themselves. They learned to scan faces, tones, footsteps, doors, pauses, and tension. They became fluent in the emotional weather of other people. That skill can make someone look wise beyond their years. But it often began as vigilance, not wisdom. Maybe you knew when a parent was irritated before they spoke. Maybe you knew when money was tight, when stress was high, when attention was unavailable. So you adjusted your appetite to match the room? You became less hungry in visible ways. You asked for things carefully. You felt guilty when you cried. You handled your own disappointment early. And if you were praised for being strong, mature, or unproblematic, the pattern locked in even deeper. Pain wrapped itself in identity. Now, being self-contained doesn't just feel familiar. It feels like who you are. That is why receiving care can feel strangely uncomfortable. Not because you don't want it, because part of you never learned how to relax inside it. Someone offers help, and you instantly minimize your struggle. Someone shows concern, and you rush to say, "I'm okay." Someone asks what you need, and your mind goes blank. Not because you have no answer, because you are not used to being allowed an answer. This is one of the loneliest parts. People may assume you are private, stoic, or naturally independent. But often, you are translating your needs into silence so fast that even you can't hear them anymore. By the time you notice what you feel, the moment has passed. Maybe that happens in conflict. Someone hurts you, but your first impulse is to understand them instead of yourself. You explain their stress. You soften your tone. You make their intention the center of the room while your own pain waits off stage. Then hours later, maybe in the car, or the shower, or a dark kitchen, the feeling finally arrives. Not just hurt, the deeper ache of realizing you abandoned yourself again. Or maybe it shows up at work. You are reliable, calm, and almost impossible to disappoint. You take on extra tasks before anyone asks. You answer messages while tired, volunteer when stretched thin, and feel guilty resting after doing too much. You call it responsibility. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is fear wearing a respectable face. Because if your worth got tied to usefulness early, the needing rest can feel like moral failure. Slowing down doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it feels wrong. So you keep going. You become the one people count on, then quietly resent being counted on. Not because you are selfish, because your generosity has started to outrun your aliveness. This guilt can also shape love in painful ways. You may be deeply caring, yet hard to reach. You give thoughtful attention, remember details, and show up when it matters. But when the relationship turns toward you, something inside stiffens. You may fear looking needy. You may fear being too much. You may fear that once your full emotional reality is visible, closeness will change. So you reveal yourself in controlled portions, enough to stay connected, not enough to feel exposed. And the tragedy is that many people who feel guilty for having needs are not asking for too much. They are often surviving on far too little. Too little comfort, too little emotional permission, too little rest, too little honest dependence. They can go years without noticing how deprived they feel, because deprivation became normal so early. What looks like strength can be a long relationship with not receiving. Sometimes this starts in obvious parentification. The child becomes the helper, the mediator, the emotional adult in the room. They comfort the parent, manage younger siblings, keep the peace, and learn that their value rises when their own needs disappear. They grow up useful, but internally unsheltered. Other times it is quieter than that. Maybe nobody relied on you for everything. They just did not make much space for your inner world. Maybe feelings were met with solutions instead of presence. Maybe pain was compared, corrected, or rushed past. Maybe you were loved, but not emotionally studied, fed, clothed, and cared for in visible ways, yet still alone inside important moments. That kind of loneliness is hard to name. It leaves no dramatic story, only a subtle ache and a lifelong hesitation around needing anything tender. So as an adult, you might become almost allergic to dependency. You like closeness, but only with an exit route. You want to be chosen, but not costly. You want to be loved, but not in ways that expose how much you need that love. This creates strange contradictions. You may dream of being fully cared for, then pull away the moment care becomes real. You may crave softness, then distrust it. You may finally receive kindness and still feel restless inside it, like your body is waiting for the hidden price. Because somewhere in you, need and danger got tied together. Need and shame, need and disappointment, need and disappointment. That is why guilt appears so fast. It rushes in before desire can form a sentence. You feel thirsty for reassurance, then immediately criticize yourself for wanting it. You feel lonely, then tell yourself other people have bigger problems. You feel overwhelmed, then decide you should handle it alone. Even your suffering gets screened for legitimacy. And if someone else has it worse, you may erase your own experience completely. Not because comparison heals pain, because self-dismissal feels familiar. Many people like this are incredibly compassionate toward others. They would never shame a friend for needing rest, reassurance, gentleness, or help. But when the same need appears in them, the inner tone changes. Suddenly softness becomes indulgence, and limits become weakness. That split usually says a lot about childhood. Somewhere along the way, your humanity became acceptable in other people before it became acceptable in you. Maybe you were only comforted when you were calm. Maybe your feelings were easier for others to handle once you had already contained them. So you learned to present pain neatly. You learned to process before speaking, shrink before asking, and smile before receiving. That pattern can look emotionally intelligent, but often it is emotional self-surveillance. Real maturity is not the absence of need. It is the ability to notice need without turning against yourself. That matters because guilt distorts self-knowledge. If every need arrives with shame, you stop meeting yourself honestly. You don't ask, what am I feeling? You ask, am I allowed to feel this? You don't ask what would help. You ask, how little can I survive on? And surviving on less can become a point of pride. You become the person who doesn't complain, doesn't ask, doesn't fall apart. But there is a hidden cost. Your relationships may become unbalanced, your body may stay tense, and your emotional life may grow harder to access in real time. Some people only realize this when they hit a wall. They are tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. They feel emotionally flat, strangely irritable, or unexpectedly tearful over small things. What breaks them is not one crisis. It is the backlog of unadmitted need. Years of holding everything carefully can create a person who looks functional but feels hollow. Strong on the surface, underfed underneath. And that hollowness can be confusing because nothing looks obviously broken. Your life may even seem stable. You work, you show up, you keep promises. You look composed in grocery stores, meetings, and family dinners. But inside, there may be a quiet grief. The grief of never fully arriving in your own experience. The grief of being dependable before you were deeply held. The grief of learning usefulness before ease. This is where the reframe matters. The guilt you feel is not proof that your needs are excessive. It is often proof that your early environment did not know how to welcome them well. Shame grew around the need, but shame is not the same thing as truth. Your needs were never the problem. The problem was what your younger self had to do to keep connection, stability, or peace. Maybe you stayed quiet to protect the room. Maybe you became competent to avoid disappointment. Maybe you asked for little because little was safer. That was adaptive. It may even have been brilliant. But adaptation is not the same as destiny. A survival pattern can keep working long after it stops being kind. And one of the hardest adult tasks is admitting that the trait people praised may also be the place you disappeared. Your strength may be real. It may also carry old loneliness inside it. So when guilt rises around your needs now, it helps to hear what it is not saying. It is not saying you are selfish. It is not saying you are dramatic. It is not saying you should go back to silence. Often it is simply the echo of an older rule. A rule that once kept you safe, then stayed long after the danger changed. The goal is not to become endlessly demanding. It is not to center yourself in every room. It is to stop treating basic humanity like an offense. To stop apologizing for hunger, sadness, fatigue, uncertainty, tenderness, and the wish to be met. That shift can feel small from the outside, but internally, it is enormous. It might look like pausing before you say, I'm fine. It might look like answering the question more honestly when someone asks how you are. It might look like resting before you earn it, asking for help before you collapse, letting a kind moment land without explaining it away. Not because it feels natural yet, because you are slowly teaching your body that need does not equal danger. You are teaching yourself that support is not a debt. Care is not something you only deserve after exhaustion. And maybe the deepest truth is this. People who feel guilty for having needs usually learned very early how to live without enough. That is why they look so composed. That is why they are so easy to rely on. But being easy to rely on is not the same as being okay. Being needed by others is not the same as being nourished. So if this has been your pattern, the most important thing to understand is not that you are broken. It is that you are trained away from yourself. And training can be questioned. Old loyalty can be loosened. Silence can stop being your main form of safety. You do not have to become a different person to heal this. You just have to stop treating your own needs like someone else's inconvenience. Because the part of you that feels guilty for needing anything is not weak. It is a part that learned, far too early, that love might shrink when you ask. And the adult work is learning a gentler truth, that your needs do not make you heavy. They make you human, and human was never too much.